Hi, this is Paul Casperson, President and Founder at Plan Giving Interactive. This week, our segment is going to be focused on the virtual endowment. And this, you might say, is a little bit of a homage to the late Robert Sharpe Jr., who many of you know in the industry passed away unexpectedly about a week ago. I didn't know Bob that well, but he helped me get published in Trust and Estates 3 times. He led the editorial committee there. And people may not know Bob, he wrote an article every month for Trust and Estates, whether it was about trends in charitable planning or describing gift planning techniques. He was just a really hard worker and dedicated to the profession. Really, along with his father, Robert Sharpe Sr., they were innovators in the industry. And Bob can be really credited to anything from taking the idea of naming our department's plan giving to gift planning and really helping to describe a philosophical difference between the two monikers, to a number of other things. But one of them that stands out to me is the virtual endowment, which is probably one of the most, I would say, popularized blended gift strategies that are out there today. So I'm going to do my best after I reread Bob's article from December of 2013 to, in my best words, to describe what the virtual endowment is from Bob. So as I mentioned, Bob was involved in the original concept. So we'll talk a little bit about the origin, and we'll describe the difference between what we mostly call a virtual endowment, but there's also a term that Bob used called a flexible endowment. And we'll review the case study from Bob's article and then summarize everything. So Plan Giving Interactive is an organization that I started several years ago. We software applications Gift Wizard, which is an online research tool, which you can also produce proposals for your donors on any type of plan giving concept that you can think about. And then we also have software automation service. So we have many standard documents that you can use, anything from gift agreements to testamentary charitable remainder trusts, particularly now because of the Secure Act, more interest in testamentary CRTs. We also customize and automate documents for your organization. If you have your own gift agreements and you want to automate them, we'll do that service as well. So again, back to this topic of blended gifts and really the virtual endowment. So as I mentioned, Bob worked with David Dunlap at Cornell University. He's a legendary fundraiser, and this was about the mid-1990s. And this was during the creation of the early prototypes of this gift vehicle. The origin of the virtual endowment really comes from, if we could summarize it, reluctant donors. Well, what does that mean? These donors may only be willing to add to fund endowments through their estate because they believe that, for a number of reasons, they believe maybe that their funds will grow more during their lifetime if they remain invested in their own business or their own investment portfolio. I'm sure that you probably have donors that you can relate to. This reticence, as Bob says, is understandable, and it leads to a point in a relationship in which a donor and the charity must accept a commitment to fund a bequest at death and maybe foregoing the economic benefits during the lifetime. And that seems silly, right? That there's a way that most donors can make these types of gifts through their estate plans, and they can stand up an endowment, but they can also experience what it's like during their lifetime through funding it. So to respond to these donors' concerns, and it's not just those who believe that their investment performance can exceed that of your organization's endowment. That would be one category of reluctant donors. But I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other ones. But to respond to that, nonprofits have developed these methods of structuring endowment gifts that provide current benefits to the eventual charitable recipient. So we want to establish what we describe to donors as this idea of a virtual or a flexible endowment. The idea of working with the donor to structure a gift that will take place in the future while providing current benefits to the charity. This isn't, a new concept. This is something that has been going on for decades, but the idea of creating a virtual endowment is new in the sense that it really gets to the heart at trying to simulate what that endowment would look like if the donor wrote the check for the entire amount today, which is different from a flexible endowment, which we will discuss shortly. So who are the ideal donors that maybe fit this description? I put investor ego. It's not necessarily investor ego. It could mean that these individuals just aren't willing to part with a significant amount of their assets yet during their lifetime, even though they probably could because they have the liquidity to do so. And maybe they just do believe that their investment prowess is able to exceed that of your organization's endowment. And look, your investment has your endowment has its own policies, and maybe it's not the mission of your organization's endowment to keep up with the investor's individual performance. You also have many donors, though, who are small business owners or they're hedge fund managers. They have a lot of money in real estate, and they simply are not liquid to be able to make these types of gifts, because we know that when we ask for gifts from donors, the first thing they think about is their cash availability. And eventually we want to get to a place where donors are comfortable enough to gift us complex assets, because we know that that is a very tax advantage way to make gifts. Sometimes that's just not possible. Hedge fund managers, real estate that's owned by multiple families, these are issues that where donors just can't give those assets even if they wanted to. And then, of course, you have bequest donors and other types of deferred gifts. So these are the ideal donors that really make sense for this type of virtual endowment conversation. Now, when you're using this terminology, it's not necessary that you use the textbook versions, but I want to describe for you a little bit of what that actually means. When we talk about donors who, let's say, have a bequest for $1 million, okay, for easy math, and your organization's payout on your endowment is 4% a year, again, for easy math. So a flexible endowment, you would ask the donor to make a gift of $40,000 a year. That's a flexible endowment bequest, okay? And a flexible endowment deferred is the same way. So maybe it's a 10-year pledge, and the bulk of the pledge is going to be a balloon payment in 10 years. But they have some resources to make gifts now that would provide immediate impact to your organization. That would be flexible endowment, bequest, or deferred. And these are gifts that are revocable. So the individuals who are making these annual commitments to you have not signed any type of binding arrangements, whether that's for the bequest or for the annual gifts that they're going to make. So this is completely kind of a flexible type of an arrangement. I've got over here the charitable organizations that would probably be able to support this type of gift. Scholarships, because scholarships don't have to receive a certain amount of annual support on a regular basis. Programmatic sometimes does, but your organization may be flexible enough that you could work with the donor on some type of programmatic initiative for a flexible endowment. And then finally, unrestricted funds would absolutely work for this type of flexible endowment. Now, the virtual endowment's a little bit different. And when we walk through the case study from Bob's paper, it'll become maybe more clear to you about how this works. But a virtual endowment is typically an irrevocable pledge if you're going to look at the textbook version of virtual endowment. So if we look at an irrevocable pledge, we'll look at the number of years that you expect that to be deferred times the annual payout, and that's going to give you what you expect the total gift to be. So again, we'll walk through the example here in the next slide or two so you can see a better understanding of that. But essentially what you're doing is that you are anticipating that the endowment will grow on an annual basis. And so the amount that the donor needs to make on an annual basis is going to increase over time. You'll also anticipate that the endowment principal is going to continue to grow. So when somebody makes a virtual bequest that's textbook, irrevocable pledge, then if it's $1 million, then it very well could be $2 million, it could be $5 million by the end of their lifetime, because theoretically the bequest will be growing during the donor's lifetime at the same pace as what the endowment would grow. The annual gifts that are spendable, that are non-endowed spendable, are going to grow at the same pace that the endowment grows. So as you can see, this is really an identical simulation. That's why they came up with the name virtual. And this type of gift, the charitable organization would likely endorse scholarships, programmatic, unrestricted. But this is where you might, if you're in an academic institution, you might also be able to work with your organization to name professorships, chairs, centers, and even other institutes where they might normally be reluctant to do that, even potentially facilities, but they would normally be reluctant to do that in any type of deferred gift. But because this is irrevocable and because the financial terms of the gift are very, very spelled out in detail, then you may be able to accomplish more in giving with donors with these types of textbook types of virtual bequest or virtual deferred gifts. So let's go over a case study. So we're going to use the case study that Bob used in his paper from Cornell University. It's an example of a donor, relatively young individual, who wanted to make a $5 million gift to Cornell University during their capital campaign. At the time, nearly all of the donor's net worth was tied up in her business that she founded and expected to take public within a few years. The donor expressed a desire to make a gift commitment to endow a fund for a purpose she wished to support, but didn't foresee being able to fully be able to fully fund this gift until the business was sold. So the university, Cornell, worked closely with the donor and her advisors to find a way to accommodate the needs of the institution and the donor's financial situation. So it was decided to announce the $5 million endowment on the execution of a legally binding pledge for $5 million. So the pledge would be paid at a future date of the donor's choosing, but would be backed by a bequest commitment. And that would serve to fund any outstanding amount at the donor's passing if the pledge wasn't fully paid at that time. So the initial commitment is termed the applicable amount as a component of the pledge agreement. So the donor agreed then to make a payment each year equal to the university's spending rate on its endowment. So this is known as the applicable percentage. And that was the basis of the annual payment, equal to the applicable percentage as applied to the applicable amount. So in Bob's example, if the university endowment earned a return of 8% and they spent 4%, then the donor would make a payment of $200,000 for that first year. And the pledge amount would be then indexed, though, by 4%. You could either index it by 4% because that's the assumed rate of return, or in many agreements, you could actually simulate the actual endowment performance on an annual basis. Either way, that would be textbook definition of a virtual endowment. But let's just say that you indexed it by 4%. Well, then your applicable amount then in that following year is going to be 5.2 million. So then your gift on an annual basis is going to be 208,000. So I kind of added a little bit to Bob's example here just to kind of overstate how a virtual endowment works. So let's just say that Joanna sold her business in 2028. By then, her applicable amount is actually $6 million because of the indexed growth. But Joanna says she now becomes kind of the different investor ego type. Now she says, well, you know what? I actually believe that I'll be able to invest, at a rate that exceeds that of the Cornell Endowment. So she continues to make the annual gift, which continues to get indexed and ratcheted up. And you can see that by 2040, she finally concedes. She's getting older. Maybe she's in her late 80s by that point. And she says, all right, I will give you, I'm going to pay off the applicable amount. Well, the applicable amount is now $13 million. So that gives you an idea of how a textbook virtual endowment works. So this is really an idea that falls into the category of blended gifts. We use the term virtual endowment a lot. I really think that most of us probably when we're working with donors, we should be using the term flexible endowment if we're going to be using the textbook type of definition for that. But there are also many other blended gifts beyond our talk for today, but I'm hoping in future videos that we'll be able to visit more about these in our blog, blendedgifts.com. And I hope that you found some information from this enlightening. And I know that there have been a lot of posts and tributes to Bob over the past week or so on social media, particularly LinkedIn. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Bob for all of the work that he did in our industry. And he was lost too soon. I know people like Bob that probably would have worked for the rest of his life. So only knows what more he could have contributed to the industry, but he will be missed. But we will value from all of the work that he did during his lifetime. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at paul@estategiftplanning.com. That's paul@estategiftplanning.com. Thank you for watching.